seems the Grocers Association is playing hardball with the government. After last night's meeting, they are no further along and no decision in sight. We have the latest. The issue of marital rape in the headlines again. This time, women's groups are being scolded for not speaking out and advocating on behalf of women in marriage. It's all straight ahead tonight on Beyond the Headlines. Good evening. Enforcement of the government's new price control mandate stalled further as the discussion between the Office of the Prime Minister and the Grocers Association takes a new turn. We jump right here this evening as no one from the organization is agreeing to interview in the middle of negotiations. So we're speaking to C. Alan Johnson, who is in touch with the association, as well as several members out of Grand Bahama. And so he's in touch with them and he has the latest on what has become an impasse. Good evening to you, C. Allen, and welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Good evening to you, and good evening to the wider Bahamas.
Can you please tell us, we've been trying all day, all afternoon to get in touch with the president of the Grocers Retail Association, Philip Benaby, without success, or anyone else for that matter. So you seem to kind of be in touch with them and have an insight. And so, of course, we're happy that you were able to join us again this evening. What is the outcome of last night's meeting?
Well, my sources are always unofficial, as was their own spokesperson. But essentially what happened is last night, this meeting has now evolved into a discussion concerning minimum wage, price control, and energy. That's all on the table. In fact, it's actually become an overall economic picture in regards to the country.
So this meeting, obviously, or these set of meetings, because that's what it seems like we're in store for, that it has no time of ending very soon. That is why now we hear the word negotiation being thrown around.
Yes, negotiations and no penalties. That's the important thing, because the law took effect yesterday. And any price that was not adjusted, whether the subject stores, etc., up to $5,000, $10,000 fine on each incident. And so essentially the price control enforcement team has essentially been told to stand down.
So then this is becoming a whole mess, A.C. Allen. The Prime Minister said, and let me just read this a little excerpt out of the dailies today. Prime Minister Davis yesterday expressed disappointment over reports that some grocers contemplated closing their stores. We'll talk about that, and we have been talking about it, or withholding items from shelves in response to his announced expansion of items now subject to price controls, which the Retail Grocers Association of the Bahamas has said will be detrimental to many business. He said, I'm looking to partner with them, or have them partner with me to bring relief to the Bahamian people. Obviously, they are seeing many, many issues in this whole picture that they are not willing to relent on.
Yeah, and this is exactly what you and I have been discussing for the last two episodes, is the fact that all of these things are interrelated. Energy is directly integrated into the price of the products. And so then you have minimum wage or wage adjustment, because again, you cannot simply adjust from the minimum wages between $210 and $260. You have to look at a whole tier adjustments within your entire organization. So then you have the fact that you have supply chain, where you have drivers, you have delivery people, all of these different things is also adjusting their prices based on the impact of the wage discussion.
So we'll get to that in a minute, because I don't want to jump ahead, because I want you to take your time when you say that has now entered the equation and the discussions, which nobody saw and could foreshadow. I know Prime Minister Davis last night, when he met with them well into the evening, thought, well, wait a minute. I thought we were discussing here these 38 items, or categories as the grocers have termed them. Now we're discussing the minimum wage increase, the increase in the cost of doing business in the way of BPL increase, all the stuff. And so I'm sure it caught him by surprise. But I want to ask you, is it safe to say that there's an impasse between government and the association?
Yes, there's an absolute impasse, because government has a need, and government does not want to relent in I guess in the first instance, because then it would look like they were weak, unprepared, unthought of. It wasn't thought through. So I'm sure most of the pushback from government or refusing to relent is from also saving face. Because what happens is, one would have to ask, like you say, did they give a full analysis as to the impact this would have across the economy? because again, this doesn't affect any singular thing or any singular business. This affects all of the businesses and all the support businesses that go along with it.
Right.
And so remember, this also has an effect on the economy, the government revenue that nobody talks about, because if no money is spent, no product is brought into the country, then government purses is actually impacted also.
In your opinion, and this is not the views of the association that I'm about to ask you right now, when you express that opinion, do you think it was just rushed with, obviously we said no consultation, and they have said that as well. The president said that to me on this show. But do you think it was rushed, ill-advised, not the amount of thought needed to go into this to understand the domino effect?
No, absolutely. This has to be like what they call unforced error, or a level of incompetence, ineptness, and capability unseen in our country economic picture. And so they could choose where they want to fit. But the reason you have to ask is that what happens was that a gamble was made, in my opinion, early this year in February when they did they decided to subsidize BPL. We are now coming to the point, if you look at the numbers of the revenue the government has been taking in, we're also moving into a slow season. And so when you look at the numbers, you would see that government can no longer subsidize BPL to the tune of $10 million or more. Actually, it's more than $10 million because they have to continue making $10 million a month payment to Sun Oil. And so it's $10 million they have to make on behalf of BPL, plus the government also the BPL has to carry its own load, hence came to increase in the price. So the government now must come up with the $10 million to pay, and people will actually have automatically the economy will constrict. Is that government is now facing challenges because we have not have a full recovery from 2019 because Grand Bahama and Abaco is still not part of the equation, and they account for 25% of the government revenue. And so the fact that the economy hasn't totally returned. So even if the economy returns pre-19, it cannot count Abaco and Grand Bahama, which is 25% of the economy. So that made at best perfect condition, we could have 75%. So we haven't reached those scales yet. So government revenue is being taxed as far as providing the resources necessary for governance. So what the government wanted to do was to ease some pain. This was the political decision, in my opinion, a political decision where they simply says people cannot handle this increase in electricity bills. So what do? Let's increase monies to them. We don't have the money to give a social safety net. So who has the money in town? The people who pay salaries. So they then rushed in with something that was ongoing. Mind you, the tripartite council was already discussing this. And if you listen to the tripartite council, they were looking at coming in at 300 to 350 in an indirect way of them saying. So what happens is government must have made a calculated call. Government is not obligated to follow their recommendation. So government made a calculated call of jumping to 260. The problem is that you can see now that government did not think about the ramifications that it would have. They focused solely on the 210, not looking at all of the other wages in between, or the very fact that... So,
C. Allen, let's kind of zero in right there on where the discussion went as well last night. Again, last night, the grocers, the Retail Grocers Association met with the Prime Minister and I guess his team as well of ministers and advisors at the Office of the Prime Minister well into the evening last evening. We are not able to reach any member of the association. They are refusing to speak right now as negotiations they're in the middle of negotiations with the Office of the Prime Minister and other entities, and so they're refusing to speak. They have been, though, there are a few members that C. Allen has contact with, and so this is what we're talking about right now, just to get an idea of some of the stuff that were discussed in last night's meeting. I want to ask you, though, one area that was unexpected that came up in the meeting, according to you and what you were told, is the issue of the increase in minimum wage. What was said, what was put on the table, and what was said?
I guess you remember now most of the grocery stores and most of their support services depends on not necessarily absolute 210, but within that 260 range. Let's quickly just divest and look at government itself for the structure. If government structure is one where If government structure is one where they have the tears, what they call it, the tears within government. You know how they say you have one place where government takes the position where a person get paid 210, the level above them is 250, the level above them is 280. The adjustment has to automatically go up the chain all the way through the government's 40,000 employees. If you look at government and the agents and the government agencies, that same rule has to apply to other businesses also, and the support staff for the food stores. Now, let's look at the food stores. The food stores has those themselves. They have transport people, they have cleaning people, they have all of these other people who now must also adjust their rate both on energy and on salaries. And so they're still in the process of trying to figure out what their salary is going to be for in January. And then they're also trying to figure out now what is their impact of BPL on their bottom line. Mm-hmm. And so now you have businesses scrambling, trying to find out what to do next. And so the fact that the grocers themselves can't figure out what the adjustment of their cost will be in absolute, because if I'm servicing a grocery store, I'm telling you, I'm trying to figure it out. It's only been a day. It's only been 2 days. I can't just wake up and tell you because I didn't get any warning just like you did for BPL or for the wage increase. And so you have companies running around trying to adjust themselves, as well as the grocery stores are also trying to adjust themselves, because they must not just factor in these limitations on profit, they must factor in the wage increase, and they must factor in the impact of BPL, all in a matter of 72 hours. Mm-hmm. And the question, and this is not like some mom and pop store with a calculator and a piece of paper. These are $1 million companies with infrastructure that they have to set algorithms in their computers to see where could we redistribute these losses that we have. How do we redistribute these costs, these unforeseen costs? And so this is huge economically in an era where I'm sure the economy can take one, maybe 1.5, but you're now talking about a three-part hit. You're talking about energy, you're talking about an increase in wages, and you're talking about a price control, loss of revenue, in a depressed economy. Let's not
absolutely,
pretend, but a depressed economy.
But then, and I understand, and we totally get it as well, and that's why we're following this very closely, because the reason we're following it closely, the consumers, the ones, the forgotten ones in the last 72 hours, they have been forgotten. It started with them and for their good, but then they've been pushed to the side as now the food store owners are saying, wait a minute, not so fast. Let's just rethink this. And so what relief can the consumers expect?
Absolutely, as I said, nothing short of a magic pill to grow the economy, because BPL can't roll back its increase, because other than that, BPL crashes. Then the government don't just back this $10 a month payment that they're making on behalf of BPL PAT. Government has already backed hundreds of millions of dollars in guarantees over the decades from BPL that will become all due should BPL collapse. Could maybe up to the tune of $1 billion that will be due almost instantaneously for individuals who are expecting to have life. And do we have $1 billion in cash? We do not. So what then happens is that when businesses, not just the grocers, begin to reassess their workload coming in January, we could see layoffs, which then pushes people to more towards the social safety net that has been inadequate at best through Dorian and COVID. And so there is no real strategy from the social safety net of social services. Then you have the retailers who can actually begin to hold back on some of the very essential things that families need to exist. First, they don't have the full amount of monies in spite of the raise, because you will have price adjustments. And so it's like a quagmire. We kind of like dug our hole in the first instant, and then somebody threw us a shovel and we kept digging, and somebody threw us another shovel and we dug another hole when we need a ladder to climb out. And that ladder is economic growth. And that is where that's where the government itself should be focused. And a lot of people, this is a lot what the retailers are saying, and even for the auxiliaries, because I already said to you, you have fast food service and mom and pop restaurants that, let's say, buys from the farm, the wholesaler here on Grand Bahama, and he is thinking about how he will adjust his prices. So that means the sandwiches, the fast food, the mom and pop, all of those different things has a cascading effect on it. And so when you look at the wholesaler that provides, and this is a major wholesaler that also provides the farm here, as we call it, Grand Bahama Farm, Grand Bahama Foods, or but I don't know exactly, but they provide a lot of the auxiliary food products to a lot of the food stores, as well as a lot of the fresh products, tomatoes, lettuce, celery, cabbage, all these different things that's used in food preparation. So if they decide that they're not going to carry certain things because it's not profitable for them, because remember, the room in the wholesale is slightly smaller in spite of the markups than the room in the retail, because they deal with volume as opposed to stagnant. If the stores are not calling for it, if the restaurants are not calling for it, they are not going to start ordering it. And so now you have a cascading effect of a non-availability of food and services, which automatically affects government's revenue, which automatically affects the social safety net and the government ability to even service BPL bill.
Wow. C. Allen, I want to ask you, I know the association met this afternoon. Or any idea of when the next meeting is with the Office of the Prime Minister and others?
I would assume it will most likely be later today or tomorrow, because what happens is today is cabinet. So I'm sure this is something.
Well, the cabinet is discussing. Yeah, cabinet certainly is discussing it. I'm talking about the next meeting with the association and the Prime Minister.
So I'm saying to you, they would have to meet after the cabinet meeting, which will actually be tonight, today, or tomorrow. I would assume this is not something that can be put on pause. But I'm sure the finance people coming in there, because understand, the duplicities, not duplicity, for lack of a better word, is the fact that our Prime Minister also happens to be the Minister of Finance. And so here it is, they're appealing to the Prime Minister, and then he has to lean over and talk to himself as the Minister of Finance to say, can I do this? Which then means he has to contact his committee, his junior minister, as we would call it, Al-Qaeda, as well as his advisory committee on the economy. And so I would assume that they didn't get any sleep last night so that they could be prepared to engage cabinet to find out how can we adjust this. Because they're not just adjusting this this is not just an adjustment that's needed for the food distributors. This is an adjustment now that they have to look across the economy to see exactly how it's going to impact. Because again, before Grand Bahama was somewhat saying, oh, well, at least we don't have the impact. Now you have they just got a rate increase. Now we have the surcharge increase. And if you read carefully what they said, we can expect a surcharge increase every single month, hitting 14% in the shortest period of time.
You know, you wonder about these businesses with announcing all these increases. Like, where y'all think it coming from? Is there a magic tree, C. Allen, that you can point me to?
Which they want, their answer will be to the economy. But one of the things, let me tell you, the hidden gem is a statement made by the United Nations. Our move to renewable energy or decarbonize it by 2030. They kind of laughed and said, based on your size and the availability of your resources, I assume they're talking about the wind, the sun, and everything, they thought it was weak of us to only have a 30% goal. Now, the problem with that is the Bahamas itself is a carbon-based taxation economy. And so at the same time we begin to move towards these non-carbon type environment, we have to simultaneously reduce carbon and increase the economy not carbon-based. That is the strategies that we're not hearing. And this is where the other businesses that waits on this so-called inflow of capital are also looking to say, unless you can increase the flow into the economy, how do we pay these higher taxes and wage bill, and how do we pay the higher BPL bill?
C. Allen Johnson in Grand Bahama. Of course, we are keeping up to date and bringing you the latest on the standoff between the government and the Retail Grocers Association. You know, the Prime Minister last week announced during his national address that some 38 new items will be added to the price control list just for the interim, and it'll be revisited in about 6 months. Well, the grocery stores, really, the merchants are saying, no, it's a no-go. It can't happen, because if it does, then they have to close their doors or stop bringing in very necessary items. And it's the whole thing has just become an absolute tangled web. And that's why we're staying on it, because it's important to you as you go to the stores every day and you need to know what's going on. And so here on Beyond the Headlines, we're committed to following this as well. C. Allen, thank you very much for joining us. We obviously will stay on this.
I will update you should anything change over the next 24 to 48 hours.
Thank you very much. Totally appreciate it. When we come back,